All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We've got Yahoo Sports senior college football and basketball writer and reporter Pete Thamel. Pete, how's everything going?
Everything's great, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm doing well knowing I'm not a college athlete because there's a lot kind of Michigas is probably a good word to say going on right now, especially in the ACC, SEC, Big 12. What kind of stuff do you think this is all anticipated, everything that's coming out, or do you think it's kind of causing some concern?
Well, I think we're in an interesting moment right now, Zach, in college athletics history. You have two leagues that have, two of the major conferences that have punted on their season and are going to attempt to possibly play in the winter or spring. And then you have three that are pressing on through a global pandemic and, you know, taking some degree, certainly, of health and safety risk with their athletes and players. And, it's going to be a compelling couple of weeks to see if we get football and how much of it we do end up getting.
Do you think the whole notion, I remember the notion a couple months ago was if there's no students on campus, there won't be football. Is that still a reality or are they going to have football until they can't?
They pretty much changed every notion that they've put up so they can keep playing. And so,
Incredible.
yes, they are making this up as they go along, and they are making it up to play football. So,
Interesting.
look, all these decisions at this, of this magnitude, Zach, are made at the presidential level.
Yeah.
And the college presidents have had more of a stomach for this than I have originally anticipated. And
Interesting.
they are now going to push on until there's a seismic event that stops it. And, there's obviously been outbreaks on campus, and there's been certainly schools like Notre Dame, and which is temporary, NC State and UNC, which appear permanent, where they're not going to have classes on campus this year, and they still intend to play football.
Um, do, do you think you're starting to start seeing a lot more players opting out, especially players that are top recruits? Because I know you've seen, so off the top of my head, I saw Micah Parsons from Penn State. I know you reported earlier, or yeah, I reported a top lineman. I know a bunch of receivers opted out. I think I saw Sage Surratt from Wake opted out. Do you think that number is just going to keep rising?
Yeah, I do think we will see a flurry of kids from the Big Ten in the near future. You'll see the really high end FBS kids go, and yeah, the opt out trend was easy to see coming because, look, this is not going to be a particularly fun season for these college athletes. Like a lot of the reasons why you do this, the atmospheres, the fans, the status on campus, the parties, the girls, all the things that are intertwined with college football really aren't going to be the same. And so I really think that the experience of playing this season will be a very different and surreal experience.
Do you do you know if they're having players sign like waivers or anything, like legal waivers or anything?
So that was a trend initially, and that has been tamped out. There were some congressmen and NCAA President Mark Emmert that were down on that. So the waiver process has been waived.
It's wild. And then flipping over to college basketball, has there been any talks about that? Or are they just waiting for that when it happens?
So, I mean, I think we'll see some type of bubbled college basketball, and how that is, that's being discussed. I mean, college basketball doesn't really tip off for 3, 4 more months, but they are intending to have the NCAA tournament, and right now, a bubble looks like the best option.
My initial thought is they could just use all the teams from the tournament, the bracket that they had before, and then just all the players that are in the NBA or don't want to play, don't have to, and they can just kind of go from there. That's not going to happen, right?
That is not going to happen.
Okay, so I just wanted to figure that out. Do you think they do a series of bubbles, or how would conferences?
It's so early, it's hard to say. Is there a
Yeah,
regular season bubble? Is there a
yeah,
conference play bubble? Is there, and like we just don't know what medically things are going to look like. Hopefully there'll be a vaccine at some,
yeah,
at some
yeah.
point in the near future that could change some things. So yeah, we will have bubbled basketball of some caliber. What it is, we're not sure.
Were you surprised that Justin Fields kind of rallied all the people in the Big Ten and trying to get them to reverse their decision?
Yeah, kids want to play, like the kids, of course they want to play. They put in time, and look, like, especially places like Ohio State that have the monetary capital, they can afford to get a quasi bubble in place. So, the kids haven't worked less hard and lifted less and worked out less because there's been a pandemic. And look, they're going to see other people play, and they're going to be angry, and it's easy to relate to that.
Do you think any can players transfer if they say a Big Ten or a Pac-12 player says I want to play and I'm transferring to say they Florida?
So if they're a graduate, they could probably play right away. If they're not a graduate transfer, I would think it's difficult because um, a lot of these places just are full with 85 scholarships, so
Yeah.
they couldn't take guys. So there has been some transferring. There were 3-4 kids in the transfer portal today from Pac-12 schools, linemen from Cal, 2 brothers at Arizona. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who has rooms for them, and then if there is a waiver test with COVID, how that ends up working out.
Who's your preseason, your top 5 for football?
I haven't even put a ton of thought into actual football because I just haven't written about actual football in so long. I mean, with who's remaining, it would be usual suspects of the SEC and Clemson, and then obviously, Oklahoma. That just your Alabama, probably not LSU this year, but maybe Georgia, those types of things. No surprises. Let's put it that way. Cincinnati's probably my dark horse from outside that.
Really interesting.
Yeah, they're very good.
What do you think's the latest we'll see some of these big marquee name players start to opt out? Like, at what point do you think the rest of them are in it for the long haul?
Well, I mean, they're practicing now. It's a good question. I think there's 2 ways to answer that. One is, for the players that haven't had the seasons, I think you'll see a bunch of them go to the NFL. And then in terms of opt-outs in college right now you actually know what opt-out means. You get your year preserved. And I think that's an important nuance in all this. So I do think we'll start to see in the next week a continued uptick in opt-outs.
Do you think since you get a continued year of eligibility, knowing that the freshmen this year will also be freshmen next year, but the freshmen next year will also be freshmen next year, do you think you're going to see a big transfer portal starting next year?
I think the transfer portal will continue to be a place where college athletes meet.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. I think it's going to be filled.
Interesting. And then for spring football, do you think, if you're assuming they have it in the spring that are not playing now, you're assuming none of the players that are high draft prospects, they're not going to be involved?
Say that again, please.
So the players. So assuming, let's say they play in the spring. Let's say Big Ten and Pac-12 play in the spring. If I give you an example, let's say they play March, April, May. Penei Sewell on Oregon, obviously, is not going to play.
No, the high-end players are not going to play. That's correct.
Interesting. Who are some of the players that this year that you think? So ACC, Big 12, SEC guys that really weren't kind of big names last year, but now finally have their shot and could maybe make some noise later in the season.
That's a good question. I think when you look around the ACC, there's going to have to be some of the younger receivers at Clemson who are going to have to step up. They obviously lost one of their higher end guys to an injury this year, and so I think the Clemson receiving core, because of some of the inexperience and because they have Trevor Lawrence throwing them the ball, is going to be a place where we're going to see some names emerge. And then, I mean, you can go around the country just in, I'm just trying to think of leagues that are actually playing right now. Obviously, the Oklahoma quarterback position has become one. Spencer Rattler's expected to start there, where there's the last 3 quarterbacks have been Heisman finalists, and so. Yeah, there is. I've not put a ton of thought into the actual personnel because it just hasn't been relevant, and a lot of them aren't playing anymore. But yeah, you're gonna obviously, it's timeless. Guys, step up.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting. And then right now, there's probably not going to be any fans at these games, right? Or is that still to be determined?
There will be some at some places.
Interesting. That's interesting. That's wild. And I think I had another question. I was drawing a blank. This is just a sort of bizarre time. Is there any? So do you know what the policy is let's say if a player tests positive during the season? Do you know what the kind of, if test positive is just kind of like a 2-week waiver?
I mean, it varies by where they are, because it goes from state rules to county rules to school rules. But you have to sit out until you don't test positive anymore, usually multiple times.
Interesting. What's the one thing you're really looking forward to seeing in the next coming weeks to see, like, as college football?
In 13 days, Southern Miss is playing South Alabama, so I'm looking forward to watching college football and seeing if that happens.
Do you think the country's eyes will be on that game, or do you think?
Oh, I think it'll have to be, right?
Yeah.
It's a significant cultural moment.
Do you think there's a point where they would say, if a lot of outbreaks, or what point do you think they would say, okay, we're moving on to the rest of the season, we're moving right to the college football playoff? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think they're going to go take it to the end?
The playoffs are a complicated thing in this, and they really haven't said anything yet and
Yeah.
haven't given us any indication. But right now the playoff stays where it initially was scheduled. Whether we get there or not, there are not a lot of people who think we will. So,
Interesting.
maybe does the playoff move at that point? They'd certainly like to play it, and the money, that comes from it would, is desperately needed right now.
Yeah. Are you cautiously optimistic that they're gonna? Are you concerned, or are you more cautiously optimistic about this? Do you think they're gonna? I feel like if they're going through with this, they have to have policies in place that they think it's going to succeed. Do you think that's the case, or you think they're just trying?
I think they're just trying. I think the policies need to be, I think you need, the NFL is testing every day.
Yeah.
Right now, the ACC, for example, is testing once a week minimum. It doesn't seem like that's a good strategy.
Interesting. That's wild. Do you think they'll ramp it up, or do you think that's a whole another ballgame?
I think they should.
Yeah. Interesting. That's wild. Well, that's really all the questions I really had for you, but I appreciate you taking the time to chat. And for people that aren't following you on social media, how can they find you?
It's my name, @Pete Thamel.
Cool. Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Just wanted to thank you again.
Thanks, Zach.
Appreciate
I really
it.
appreciate it, man.